As I said in the previous presentation, President Roosevelt was a new and modern president. He used the presidency as a bully pulpit. And if you think about what that means, a pulpit, of course, is someplace high up that you stand. And of course, bully meaning to push people around in an authoritative way. That's what he did. He used news also to influence legislation. He served as the protector of people. And you can see it's this very charismatic, authoritative style. The Square Deal was his program to fix the evils of society. He believed in conservation of natural resources, control of corporations, and consumer protection. Okay, that last one being a relatively new concept because, of course, now we are a consumer nation. And a couple of quotes that he was very well known for is politics is the art of the possible. And a second one, which leads to his big stick policy, is speak softly and carry a big stick. We'll talk more about that one in coming presentations. One thing that Roosevelt was noted for was his involvement when it came to organized labor. The 1902 coal strike was a huge strike, and thousands of workers united to protest poor conditions and low pay. These coal miners wanted a 20% raise, and now an hour workday, and they wanted to be able to have union recognition. Mine owners, of course, refused to bargain, and the workers went on strike. And this threatened the fuel needs of the entire nation. So Roosevelt felt it was his place to intervene. He had both groups meet and go to arbitration. And, of course, that's where you sit down. Arbitration is where you sit down, have a meeting, and the third party helps you negotiate, or third party mediates. And then both sides agree that what that third party decides is going to stand. And this is an example of a president helping to mediate conflicts, especially in industry. Roosevelt was also well known for trust busting. He was actually called a trust buster. Trusts at this point in time controlled 4/5 of the industry in the whole country. And Roosevelt believed that there were good trusts that accomplished good things, and also bad trusts. And he wanted to attack bad trusts. And this distinction, of course, is subjective. And not everybody agreed with his definition of good and bad trusts. But during his presidency, several trusts were broken up, and real government regulation of industry began. For example, in the railroad industry, Roosevelt realized that we desperately needed federal regulation of railroads. And the case Northern Securities versus the United States, which went to the Supreme Court, ended a major railroad monopoly during Roosevelt's presidency. This case, Northern Securities versus the U.S., was a precedent case for trust busting. And so this is why Roosevelt earned this nickname, Trust Buster. And of course, this is a political cartoon showing him stomping on bad trusts, but of course, leaving the good trusts alone. And it's pertinent because Roosevelt was known for being a bear hunter. This is how the teddy bear came about. It was named after Theodore Roosevelt. You already know about the jungle, pardon the disgusting picture on the right. But of course, this was written by Upton Sinclair, and it was meant to expose the conditions of the meatpacking industry, and particularly issues of sanitation and corrupt management. The impact of the novel was that it called the public to act upon these horrible conditions. Sinclair was actually invited to the White House as a result of his publication. Roosevelt investigated Sinclair's claims, and the report that came out as a result of the investigation accounts that Sinclair's information is correct. It is accurate. Horrified by this, Congress passes the Meat Inspection Act of 1906, which establishes cleanliness requirements and federal meat inspection. Also, the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed in 1906 as well, and this said that all food and drug products must be labeled accurately. Okay? In addition to that, the Food and Drug Administration, otherwise known as the FDA, is set up. That happened under a later progressive president, President Wilson. Conservation was another very important issue for Theodore Roosevelt. The industry was consuming large portions of our country's natural resources, and pollution was destroying waterways. So Roosevelt sees our shrinking wilderness and natural resources and becomes concerned and establishes several national parks, including Sierra, Yosemite, Cherokee, Tahoe, Rio Grande, and Hoosier. In doing so, he set aside large portions of forest land for public enjoyment and also protection. He worked with Gifford Pinchot, who's a conservationist, and he appointed him as head of the U.S. Forest Service. Working with Pinchot, he developed certain areas of land that would be used for common enjoyment, for public enjoyment or the common good. Roosevelt is known as the first conservation president. That's a picture of him with Pinchot. One area in which Roosevelt did not make a whole lot of progress was in the area of civil rights. Progressive era as a whole ignored the needs of minorities, and Roosevelt also ignored the issue for the most part, but he did recognize a few individuals, including Booker T. Washington, who was the first African American to be invited to the White House, and he believed in, of course, racial equality that would occur gradually through education, specifically vocational education. And he, of course, established the Tuskegee Institute. Roosevelt also recognized W.E.B. Du Bois, who demanded, of course, equality now, and led the Niagara Falls Convention. Du Bois insisted that African Americans had been given rights of citizenship, and there should be no delay in having access to those rights. Also during this time, we see African Americans organize the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and they work for equality for all races, particularly African Americans. In the next presentation, we'll talk about another progressive president, President Wilson.